Hey Beer Geeks, I'm super excited to say that my latest book, A Year in Beer, is now out all over the world. So if you're not from the UK and you need international shipping, you can get it from the Camera Bookstore. If you are in the UK, you can also get it from there and also from beer merchants with these lovely beers. We'll get into that. But all the links that you need to buy the book are down below, and that's the pitch section done. Let's have a look at what's inside. So before we get stuck into what's in the book, I want to ask you a question, and feel free to put your thoughts down in the comments below. But do you think that you drink seasonally? Because if somebody had asked me that 5 years ago, I'd have probably said no. So I drink IPAs and lagers and probably cask bitters and pales all year round. And there might be a little bit of variation come winter. I might drink more bitters, I might drink more porters. I'll definitely drink sort of imperial stouts and barley wines a bit more when the evenings are cold and I've got a cheese board, but that's about it really. I wouldn't consider that particularly seasonal, and I think that probably the same is true for you. But in the last couple of years I've got really into this idea of the context around a beer. You know, why we pick a certain beer on a certain day, why we enjoy a certain beer more than we did like a couple of weeks beforehand. Is it that the liquid's changing, or is it that something around us or our environment is changing? And that was the genesis of this book. So A Year in Beer is kind of an exploration of how the ingredients in beer and, you know, our tastes in drinking change throughout the year. So if we rewind 100 years ago, we didn't have pasteurization, we didn't have refrigeration, we didn't have cold transport, and we didn't even have cold storage. So everything that we brewed was entirely reliant on the seasons. And come summer, in many parts of the world, we pretty much stopped brewing because the temperatures were so warm that we got so many infections rather than these nice, clean fermentations. On top of that, we had one malt and one hop harvest, and lots of people were still making beer at home 150, 200 years ago, using local ingredients, whatever they could get their hands on, the grains that were available either at that time of year or that they'd stored. So everything was entirely reliant on what was around you. Now, in modern times, we've got much better control over our fermentations and over our ingredients and the storage of those ingredients, but there's still an imprint of all of that that happens in our brewing. So we still brew entirely seasonally. So in August, I go to the malt harvest up in Norfolk and learn about how there are autumn and spring sown varieties and how they could change depending on the varieties that are actually grown and the way that they're kilned and looked after, so that every beer and every year is slightly different. I go to the hop harvest where I write about the picking of the hops, and we learn about wet hop beers where there's a short season, about 3 weeks, where you can brew beers just with the fresh hops off the vine, and for the rest of the year you're using the dried stuff. More concentrated, easier to brew with, but also, you know, you lose some of the flavours that you can get in these flowers when you dry them. I also visit several breweries that still open ferment and don't entirely control the temperatures of it, which can change the character of their beers both from year to year and indeed from season to season, even in their core beers. So what I'm trying to say is that even if you don't think you drink seasonally, even if you're just drinking IPAs and lagers all year round, you're still drinking seasonally, and I think that's a brilliant thing about beer. So it's talking about all these historical things that come to influence, you know, what we drink and why we choose to drink it. But then it's also about the absolute now. So I'm giving you tips on the best events to go to, the best beer festivals, the best places to drink outdoors. I give you tips on drinking by the fireside, because obviously those beers are going to warm up by the fire. And so throughout the season, there's all these things that just talk about, you know, not just the intoxication of alcohol, which we talk about a lot in beer, but the actual intoxication of the place that you're in, the music that's playing, the temperature outside, whether it's sunny or rainy, who you're with, what you're eating with the beer, or what you've just eaten, where you've just been. Was it a long walk or a lazy day in your sweatpants? All of these things change with the seasons, and all of these things change the beers that we're drinking. And that is A Year in Beer. In January, I'm talking about low ABV brewing and of course spontaneous brewing, which is happening at these lower temperatures when the beers can cool overnight in their cool ships. In February, I'm down at Harvey's Brewery talking about best bitters, but I'm also matching beer and pizza because it's National Pizza Day. In March, of course, we're talking about porters because it's St. Patrick's Day. In April, we dig into Easter beers, this thing that nobody really knows what it is, but I pick out the favourite varieties and trying to come up with a definition of what these beautiful, fresh, floral, all about the new life kind of beers are. In May, I go foraging with Yonder Brewing to collect elderflower for a beer that they do with Daya and lots of other stuff that are really spring kind of based. In June, I go to the seaside and I talk about the best beers to have with all of the food that we get at the seaside, like crab sandwiches, lobster, even whippies with flakes, and explore the micropub scene, which is this burgeoning, amazing, modern twist on the pub. By July, we're talking about barbecue food and we're talking about the best places to drink outside. In August, it's intensely hot, it's possibly humid, so we're drinking shandies, but we're also just getting stuck into the malt harvest season, so I explore that, all the different varieties, the different times they're sown, all the ways that you can kill them and the way that they're used in beautiful beers. And then September, of course, we've got Oktoberfest starting out, so I'm talking about Märzens and Fest beers. I'm talking about the hop harvest in the UK, and I go down to Hewkins Hops in Kent and witness that and write about that, and of course the glorious wet hopped beers. In October, of course, we're talking about pumpkin beer. I do a big defense of that, as well as digging into the seasonal food of that year. Then in November, we're talking about big barley wines and imperial stouts that we like to hunker down with, and the cheese that matches with that. And then, of course, in December, we're matching our beers with the beautiful food of Christmas. Obviously, Christmas beer itself is an incredible thing. I delve into how the history of Christmas beer, particularly Belgian Christmas beer, came from the brewing of Scotch ales and how much Scotch ale was being sent to Belgium, and they sort of ran with that. And I'm giving you a homebrew recipe, my favourite homebrew recipe for that time of year, and talking about how beer becomes, the last really big thing that we enjoy at the end of every year. And now we'll talk about the elephant in the room, or rather these 4 delicious beers next to me. You can buy these in a 4-pack with the book from beer merchants right now. It'll only last a week or so, so get in there quick if you want to try these. But each one of them is brewed with one of my favourite breweries and represents the seasons. So in spring, I brewed a double West Coast IPA with the amazing Daya Brewing. And this West Coast IPA, we wanted it to invoke rain-soaked pine forests and new growth of flowers. So it's floral, it's piney, it's dry, it's bitter, and it's really, really thirst-quenching, but also makes you come in for sip after sip after sip, despite the warming ABV. Then we moved to summer, where I went to Lost and Grounded and we brewed a single decocted Czech Pilsner. So it's super crushable, but it's loaded with that kind of fresh mown grass of summer, and it's obviously a great beer to have after you've just mowed the lawn. Then, this is what I'm enjoying right now. So this is Elusive Brewing's Golden Green. I went down there and we brewed a wet hot beer with beautiful fresh sovereign hops, which we picked from a farm in Hereford and threw it straight into the brew. We drove it down, and it's a beautiful kind of English golden ale / best bitter with loads of floral notes and loads of almost kind of grape skin tannins in there from the completely untried hops. It's a beautiful, beautiful beer, excuse me. And then we get to possibly my favourite of the 4 beers, which is this beauty that I brewed with Siren. So this is inspired by the classic English barley wines like Fuller's Vintage Ale, Coniston No. 9. So it's an 8.6% barley wine with loads and loads of golden hops. So it's honeyed, it's spiced, but it's got loads of candied fruit and caramel and a little hint of banana as well from the yeast. And it's going to be perfect for aging. So that's what I'm going to be doing with the rest of these cans. But I mean, this is absolutely stunning. It's one of my favourite beers of the year so far. So these beers and this book are available as a pack from beer merchants now. They will only last a couple of weeks, so get them today if you can to ensure that you're going to get them. If you just want the book, they're on the Camera Bookstore as well, and that ships internationally, so wherever you are in the world we will be able to get one to you, but hopefully lots of independent bookstores and bottle shops will be stocking it as well. Thanks for listening. Thank you so much for the support you throw me and Brad on the channel. It's hugely appreciated, and the channel is what allows us to do these amazing cool things all the way through the year. So please pick up this book. I hope it gives you a new angle, a new look at the wonderful variation we have in the beer industry. It's its greatest strength, how many different styles we have. So this is kind of a manifesto about saying, hey, don't just pick up the IPA or the lager like I always used to. Let's try something else that really fits the context of where we're drinking. Cheers.